Stay tuned to the end of this video for a word to our patrons. Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. And I am besieged by content. So, 6.5 Traum is rapidly approaching, more rapidly than perhaps we thought, and with it, it has a pre-release of a new limited SSR writer, Constantine the 11th. I am using Arabic numerals in my notes to avoid accidentally tripping myself up reading Roman numerals. There is no chance for confusion. But in today's video, we're going to discuss history, lore, mechanics, and more, if this is your first time tuning into Wanted, so buckle up for all of that. And so, beginning at history, Constantine 11 Palaiologos, or longer, Constantine 11 Drogesis Palaiologos, is the last credited Roman emperor, as he was the Byzantine Emperor from about 1449 CE until the fall of Constantinople in 1453 CE, where he also died. I'm going to leave that flub in. That's a funny one. That's just for you, listeners. But this ends a line of leadership which stretched all the way back to Constantine I, declaring Constantinople the new Roman capital in 330, and goes back even further to the original Roman Empire, and so on and so forth. Real end of an era stuff. Anyway, Constantine the 11th was the son of Emperor Manuel II Palaiologos and Helena Dragas, who was the daughter of the ruler of Serbia. Helena served as the regent before Constantine was crowned after the death of his brother John, and then later became a nun. And the Eastern Orthodox Church, under her monastic name, has sanctified her as Saint Hypomone, which can be translated into English as Saint Patience. More fun facts for you. Anyway, Constantine the Last was born on the 8th of February, 1404. He was the fourth son of Emperor Manuel, and is described as being born in the purple, which is a way of saying that he was born in an imperial palace while Manuel was the reigning emperor. During this time period, the Byzantine Empire was in severe decline. Its territory was super reduced, and it didn't have a lot of friends. And to promote cohesion, the emperor was doling out pieces of land to his sons to administrate. As the fourth, young Constantine did not get a dominion originally. There was no extra land for him. His eldest brother John was made co-emperor and ruled over Constantinople, and his other brothers were given chunks of the other Byzantine/Greek territory. Now, we don't have a lot of information on young Constantine XI's life. He was friends with one Georges Frantzes, don't know, there's a T and a Z in there, who was a courtier, not a courier, but the game was rigged from the start. Anyway, he was a courtier and historian whose work, Chronicle, describes the final years of the Empire, which he was an eyewitness to. He was there the whole time. However, he and many other historians tend to speak very highly of Constantine, as they are kind of eulogizing his reign. Well, I just cannot speak today. We'll try and focus up. I'm leaving some of these flubs in. Anyway, as such, we have to take comments like that he was always courageous, adventurous, skilled in martial arts, horsemanship, and hunting, with a grain of salt. General commentary for his contemporaries do seem to indicate he was always more of a soldier, and while he was a competent administrator, he was regent of Constantinople for many years, off and on, he preferred military to state matters, at which he seemed decently skilled with what he had. Honestly, I'm going to be expurgating a really, really long, career and life history here to crunch down into a 20 to 30 minute video, but based on what I can read, it seems like Constantine was mostly held back by the fact that there just weren't enough men in the Byzantine Empire to beat up anybody, and the Ottoman Turks were very large. If he'd had access to an actually decently sized force, he probably could have done pretty well for himself. So, in 1422, the Ottomans sieged Constantinople, during which time Manuel had a stroke. He was partially paralyzed until he died 3 years later. This caused John VIII, his brother, who was the co-emperor, to travel abroad to seek additional aid from Europe, and he left Constantine in charge while he was gone. Keeping in mind, remember, Constantine, being one of the younger brothers, was basically not given any additional territory, so he was hanging out in the capital. Now, on the 21st of July in 1425, Manuel died and John became the full emperor, John VIII Palaiologos, after returning from his trip abroad. He then granted Constantine land in the city, which was small but of strategic value. And then Constantine's next major accomplishment was the campaign in the Peloponnese, which were besieged by the Ottomans and also by Carlo I Tocco, the ruler of Epirus, which, if you don't know, is the border region between Greece and Albania today. In 1427, Emperor John personally campaigned in the territory of Morea, which is the Peloponnesian Peninsula, along with Constantine and Francis. And after the Battle of the Echidnades, defeated Tocco, who sealed the deal by wedding Constantine to his niece, Maddalena Tocco, who changed her name to the very Greek Theodora, though sadly she died in childbirth in 1429, just a few years later. So Constantine then ended up in a very complex series of political and military work. He was appointed despot of Morea, that's the territory of the Peloponnese again, but he shared it with his brothers Theodore and Thomas. There is then a lot of fighting, diplomacy, and other dramatic events which happened during this time, which I am abridging for the sake of releasing this video in a timely manner, but if you're interested, you can look into it yourself. You're going to notice that we do lots and lots of time skips over the period of like 2 or 3 years or more at a time. For instance, we now move to our next big historical event in 1435, when Constantine is summoned back to Constantinople, presumably to serve as regent for his brother John. This caused some conflict between the three despots, particularly Theodore, who was older than Constantine, because being called back to the capital indicated that Constantine was his brother's favorite heir. As a result of this conflict, though it was eventually mediated and there was not a proper civil war, Constantine was not able to make it back to Constantinople until 1437. But Constantine was appointed as John's regent and projected heir once more. John then left to go to a council for several years about reuniting the Eastern and Western Church. This in particular, though I do not focus on it too much in this script, was kind of a hot-button issue for both John and Constantine. They didn't really, at least according to contemporary sources, seem to care so much about actually unifying the churches. What they wanted to do was to unify the Eastern and Western Church and put them back under the umbrella of the Catholic Church, because they thought that would make the Pope actually sit up and do something about it. Spoilers, the Pope is not helpful in this narrative. And honestly, it may have cost them some local support because there were a lot of staunch anti-unionists in the Byzantine area. Anyway, during John's time away, the Byzantine Empire is relatively peaceful until he returned in 1440, and the churches were officially declared unified. The general populace was not happy about this, but there was hope that it would lead to continued aid from the papacy. Spoilers, that aid does not really appear. Everybody in Europe was too busy doing other bullshit. So Constantine was relieved of his duties, but did not originally turn to Morea. First, he went around to arranging a second marriage. Specifically, he got married to Caterina Getiluso, daughter of the ruler of the Isle of Lesbos. Yeah, that one, which occurred in 1441. Though, again, this ended rather tragically, as about a year later, she died of an illness while she and Constantine were delayed by a Turkish fleet. Constantine never managed to remarry after this. The second death is arguably even more tragic, as during this time, Constantine was shopping around with his brothers to try and arrange a territory closer to the capital. He was trying to basically go swapsies on being despot of Morea, which I should probably pronounce a little bit more like Morea, so you don't get confused, but it's spelled that way. But in particular, his brothers weren't budging, and indeed one of his brothers, Demetrios, worked with Turkish allies to attempt to seize the throne. This was the time period when Constantine was once again summoned back to the capital to defend it, and he was out with his wife when they were blockaded and she fell ill and died. So, at this point, Constantine and Thomas are now the sole despots of Morea, as their brother Theodore had done a swapsies, moving his holding out there. One of the things that Constantine was ruling now was the city of Nistras, which was a very important port in the region now. But we have even more campaigning, diplomacy, and drama. We are once again simplifying. Highlights include, though, that Constantine recaptured Athens and Thebes. He rebuilt the Hexamilian Wall, which dated back to the Roman period, and was built on the Isthmus of Corinth. The wall was built basically immediately behind where the pass at Thermopylae would be. But, unfortunately, the wall was demolished for the last time by the Sultan Murad II, because he marched on Morea, devastated the defenders, and forced Constantine and Thomas to capitulate. Once again, mostly because he just had access to infinitely more dudes. Now, John VIII died in 1448, and after another brief scuffle, Demetrios, the imperial mother, Helena Dragas, as the regent, expressed both her personal desire and that it was the Emperor John's will that Constantine be declared the emperor. And everybody actually did own up and agree to this and sent him a note, meaning that on the 6th of January, 1449, in Mistras, Constantine performed a small ceremony, declared himself Emperor of the Romans, and he forewent the more grandiose ceremony in Constantinople. He was planning that a more humble and relaxed ceremony would win him back some street cred with the people. It does not seem to have done so, but did not necessarily directly impact him. And now that he's actually the emperor, there is an intense period of political maneuvering, and also Constantine's, as you know from previous spoilers, fruitless search for a good match for the empress, which often involved sending George Sphrantes to basically every corner of the world to try and find a match. He tried to marry Murad II's widow. There's several, ladies of Greek and Italian states, some others in the Balkans. It never panned out. This was important, by the way, because both Constantine and all of his remaining brothers did not have heirs. The key thing here, the first, is that in 1450, Helena died, which bereft Constantine of a key advisor. He wasn't sure who to turn to anymore. George was often the one here. He ended up being called, Lord of the Wardrobe, so he was basically the emperor's most intimate confidant and contact. And Murad II died, as I implied earlier, leaving his successor, the young Mehmed II. And although the Mehmed swore, we have factual evidence for how much of a backstabbing liar he is. I said it. He swore before God and the prophet and all the angels he wasn't going to fight Constantine. Constantine didn't believe him for a second. He searched for allies somewhat fruitlessly. They managed to hire some mercenaries. There were a couple of groups that did end up allying with them, mostly through convenience. The Venetians agreed to sell him some gunpowder and stuff, but ran afoul of Turkish taxation fees and other shipping requirements, tariffs, and thus were accidentally put into war with the Ottomans as well. But Constantine's distrust was proven right in 1452 when Mehmed started to build a fortress to encircle Constantinople and control the Bosphorus. Basically, the Bosphorus area is that little, stick of land that connects Anatolia and the main Grecian peninsula area. It's where Istanbul/Constantinople is right now. The Ottomans controlled both sides of that, with Constantinople in the middle. So they'd already built a fortress on one side, and then Mehmed decided to build a fortress on the other side, completely encircling everything. And this basically ultimately began the build-up to a final declaration of war and the siege of Constantinople. Constantine reached out to all corners for aid, did not get too much effort. Had a very small group of loyal allies, and some decent amount of respect, but those were all people who were way too far away and had to, arrive. The Turks' advanced force arrived outside the city gates in 1453, and the siege began. This is a really long and interesting series of events. I cannot go into detail right now. This script is already 4 pages long. We have been here for about 15 minutes of raw recording time already. If you're really interested, there are many accounts. It's a very big event in, human history during this time period and region. Very impactful overall. You can look up several sources about it and do some more scholarly digging if you so choose. Now, Mehmed offered surrender several times. According to his own demands, he only wanted the city. But despite the encouragement from his courtiers, Constantine refused to leave. He thought he would not be much of an emperor with no empire. And a quote is later attributed to him in this time, claiming that he said, "Whomsoever wishes to escape, let him save himself if he can. And whoever is ready to face death, let him follow me." So he was pretty resolute, and so were anybody basically left inside the walls. There's a lot of praying and stuff going on there, because things get pretty grim from here. On the 22nd of May, it was reported there was a lunar eclipse, which just so happens to coincide with a prophecy that Constantinople would fall when the moon was on the wane. What do you know about that? Constantine tried to parade an icon of Mary, who was said to be the guardian of the city, through the streets, but it fell off the stand when the weather suddenly started hailing, and then the next day they couldn't continue it due to thick fog. This may be what we call an act of God. Unfortunately, the story does not get any better from there. You already know how this is going to end. I told you earlier. There's no exact account for how Constantine the 11th died. The Ottomans made their final assault on the 29th of May. They breached the city gates. There were no eyewitness accounts. The general story reported by historians and people making inquiries at that time and later, Constantine died in the fighting. One of the more consistent stories is that he tried to convince his officers to kill him rather than be captured alive. When they wouldn't do it, he threw himself into the thickest fighting and fell there, or he may have just been killed in the press at the gates. There were a couple of Turkish narratives that tried to indicate that he tried to flee the city finally at the last minute and was killed by some Ottoman Marines in the harbor, but we really have no way of verifying either of these. But we do have a final little bit of history for you, though, because there's a bit of popular folklore. After his death, Constantine is referred to as the Marble Emperor, as part of a popular bit of folklore. Since there was no first-hand account of his death, there's not even a exact confirmation that his body was found after. In the 15th century, the Greeks began a story that he was not truly dead, but that an angel came down and turned him into a marble statue and stashed him away. When God says Constantinople is coming back, Constantine the 11th, the last one, will spring forth from under the Golden Gate, which is associated with the triumph parades of Byzantine emperors, and drive all the Turks out. And funnily enough, the Ottomans seem to have taken this threat very seriously. At some point in history, they walled up the Golden Gate and were not interested in attempts to sample its rocks or excavate it archaeologically. So, apparently, they gave this one some credit. Now, we should count it as a positive that the history part was so long, because the fate lore part will be pretty short, actually. Constantine is a historical character. His servant stats, profile, and capabilities are basically in line with these facts. You know, a lot of emphasis on the last emperor stuff, but still decently appropriate for everything going on out there. I will say there's no note of the Marble Emperor story in his profile anywhere, so if you ever need a skill buff for some guts, we've got some material to mine for. Rider is probably a good fit for him. He's said to have had good horsemanship skills in addition to other activities as a commander and emperor. The only other fitting class might be Saber, and again, that probably involves the Marble Emperor legend. Supposedly, one of the facets of the story was that the angel would, give him back his sword from the siege, and he would, go out to lay waste to the Turks. So there is some room there, but it's not very outright. So Constantine 11 actually got a fairly early cameo in this year's White Day event, where he used the alias Michael after being depowered during the respective individual story, so he was a helpful little guy there. A little bit of a weird setup for a future character, but we got a good look at him and stuff. He's, of course, going to be a major character in the upcoming 6.5 chapter Trom, obviously, because he's on the pre-release banner. But getting into that would be spoilers. So we won't. Look forward to future follow-ups, though. And I can say one more fun fact about him specifically in FGO. Constantine actually had his NP animation edited. It originally showed the Hagia Sophia with minarets. This is an Islamic edition. It was not historical to Constantine's reign, so they actually redid the art. They were a little too close to modern reference photos, probably. Alright, mechanics. So, limited SSR rider, robust category, should come as no surprise. Constantine is high HP, low attack. His stat line is close, but not exactly the same as Maeve, but it's in that region if you're wanting to do some comparisons. He is quick arts, buster with average hit counts and NP gain. It's 0.52, so pretty solid. And we return to an old standard. It's been a long time, but we've got a support buster NP. Actually, I don't know exactly how long it's been. There are a few more of these scattered around. But this was a style of design in FGO that was very popular much earlier that has usually fallen off a little. Even units that are considered support, like Koyan and Oberon, have offensive NPs that are buster. Anyway, he's got a buster support NP. It doesn't do damage directly, but it does give him buster up for 3 turns based on the NP level. Starts at 30%, goes to 50%. He has a 1/1 invincible on himself as well when he does this, and gives all Roman allies, which should include himself since it doesn't say all other allies, just all allies, a 5k damage cut for 1 turn. Reduce all damage by 5,000. It also raises defense for all allies, regardless of Romanness, for 1 turn, based on overcharge, which starts at 100%. You will face tank, and you will like it. 100% def ups are not uncommon. They're a little hard to rig in some cases, but they do exist. But this is the starting effect on that NP. Very spicy. So, in the skills department, his first skill gives him 30 to 50% NP gain up for 1 turn. And since he was already pretty alright, that's pretty good. It gives him a taunt for 1 turn, target focus on himself, and generates 10 to 20 stars. Pretty good skill for the first one. Also does mean that if you have 1, you don't need to level him to do the funny drop strats like a Georgios, but, he is an SSR. Second skill is a charisma type. It's a 10 to 20% attack up, and also a 10 to 20% buster up for the party for 3 turns, and furthermore gives Roman allies a 20 to 30% crit up for that same 3-turn period. His final skill gives him a 20 to 30% NP battery, a 20 to 30% crit damage up on self for 3 turns, and also 5 to 10 stars per turn on himself for that same 3 turns. But he also gets an on-death buff in that block, where if he is defeated, the last servant in your lineup, your rightmost, basically gets the exact same gauge, crit, and stars buffs. They get, the infusion of NP, same as he would, the same crit up chance, and the same stars per turn amount. So, gives him a little boost, but also passes it along. His passives are the perfect linear writing B+, magic resistance B+, and independent action C++. A plus. So tanks are a relatively small but proud tradition in FGO, going all the way back to Leonidas and Georgios. Constantine fits into this niche pretty nicely. He's capable of buffing the team both offensively and defensively, while taunting, turtling, and tanking his way through a lot of punishment. Only the meanest of enemy piercer buffs will get by all of his defenses, since he has a hard defense, a huge damage cut, and a 100% defense up when you fire his NP. To pull this off, you're probably going to want to pair him with some sort of offensive unit to do the bulk of the damage, preferably a Buster to take advantage of his NP for Buster chains, though it is not necessarily required. There are several riders who fit this build, both in the single target and AoE variety, depending on what you need to be doing. If you're mostly focused on tanking and not attacking with Constantine, you can even open the field, though, to other classes. With his Roman synergy, he can work well with Romulus Quirinus, Summer Nero, or Spartacus, who all have Buster NPs. Though, sadly, a lot of Roman units or arts are quick. They will not maximize those damages, but they will be living with that 5k damage cut. His buffs don't really seem to work well with Koyan's reloading strats, and he has no offensive NP for Oberon turboing, so you may want to use some other buffers in there if you're not doing 30 turns of turtling. Though, obviously, Koyan's nature of, resetting some stuff with her battery can make it easier to force him to fire his NP if you need it in an emergency, but it's not an exact synergy. And he only has a 30% battery. But that means it's time for the Humble Merlin to be recommended again. Merlin has hard defenses, he has a buff for max HP, and for crit damage on the offensive turn, so it can help you turtle up that damage and also keep your charges rolling. And as mentioned before, Leonidas is another Buster tank who can help you wall up. He's got some very solid defensive buffs. Great selection of other guys to, keep your main attacker alive while the enemy throws some gnarly shit at you. That does mean you are probably going to be using Constantine mostly on what we call story content clears and challenge quest type clears. Other high difficulty content, of which there will be much more coming in the future. The basic strat I would recommend here is going to be hold his NP until the enemy NP turn. It's kind of like using Jean in an old school arts comp, and then fire it off before they go. If it's a single target, you hold your taunt to focus damage on yourself, and hopefully you get stopped with the invul and generate a lot of NP. Otherwise, depending on what the enemy's buffs are like, 100% def up and a damage cut should work against AoE NPs, though you do got to be careful. So it's all the better, if you can make the whole team Roman for that 5k cut. Consider your Roman units carefully or involve some Romulus Quirinus funny. And then ideally, Constantine or the rest of the squad has enough stars for a big crit follow-up. Now for CEs, this is going to be a little tricky. You're going to want to make sure he's generating enough NP to fire his NP in a tough fight, and there's plenty of ways to set that up. But I would also say that defensive-focused Cs are probably more critical here. You could use something like Ideal Holy King for extra max HP, Volume and Hydrogyrum for those free invuls, or one of the several CEs that offers a Guts. Guts is one of the things that he does not rock very well. If you are going offensive, the aim of the day is Buster and crit damage up. NP power is useless here. So, other stuff. Ascension mats are going to be pretty straightforward. Since Trauma isn't out yet, they didn't try to stick you with some brand new mats right away. You got some proofs, you got some horseshoes, you got some bicorn horns, no biggies there. His skills, though, do call for a lot more proofs, along with slightly more in-demand materials like soaps, or roast deals, they look like bars of soap, and circlets, so I hope you're up on your advanced quests for those drop rates. And also, Constantine is another pretty rare servant. He's on raid up right now, damn you crunch time, for the Trom pre-release, and is part of a flood of raid ups on the 8th anniversary, like most servants I've been talking about for the past 5 months. The pause there was me staring at my calendar note. And otherwise, as a limited servant, is banished to Lucky Bag summons. Now, we can intuit that he will have another raid up in JP this year based on how they're going. When exactly that will be, we do not know. We cannot know. It could be the, 30 million downloads will be bringing back a lot of guys. We're just getting so many raid ups on our 20 million downloads, for instance. Stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't know. We're going to see what's up. But keep your eyes peeled. And now we're donezo. This script feels very short and very long, probably because it's hella front-loaded. Sorry, once again, we're not always in time with banners, but since we're rushing, we'll get them done when they're done. I'll try to put Charlie out in a more timely manner because, we know that it's coming for sure, but also we can't be exactly sure when Trom's going to hit, except maybe if they do another broadcast, which they haven't announced yet, I don't think. A lot of people are utterly bamboozled by the social media campaign running right now and when it ends, and they're like, well, hold on, what does that mean? So I'm going to try to do the script. Very excited to do Charlemagne. Big fan of his character, and also, like a lot of that history stuff. But also, man, we're going fast and not eating ass. Also, with Trump coming up, do look forward to a Best of Let's Talk FGO for Lost Belt 6 eventually. Though, again, no exact guarantee when that will drop, not because of timing and stuff, but because it is a lot of audio to parse through and edit together. If you don't know, the Best of Let's Talk FGO compilations we've done so far are kind of collecting all of our Lost Belt thoughts, because those episodes are very popular, but our thoughts are usually spread over a couple of the episodes of the podcast, so I've stitched them together into one big audio drop you can listen to kind of like all the way through. Lost Belt 6 is very long, and we talked about it a lot, so the end result of that video will also be really long. I cannot guarantee how fast I will be physically able to edit it all together, but keep your eyes peeled for it. And that's going to be the end of this episode of Wanted. Keep your eyes peeled for even further adventures of Wanted, as I'm just going to be beaten up by banners. Basically until Anniversary, I think, unfortunately. But we appreciate you watching this video. If you're watching, give us a like if you're here right now. Do it. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't hurt you. Click the like button. In fact, it makes me feel better. You got any comments, you can hit them up in the comment section down below. You can also join our Discord. Link in the video description and channel page. We have a dedicated rolling thread if you want to post your roll results there before or after watching the Wanted video. Also, make sure you're subbed to get new videos like Wanted and new streams. Ring the bell for notifications so you know when we're posting videos or streams. You can support our channel memberships to get access to membership badges and emotes, and support us on Patreon to get access to this video earlier than the rest of the viewing public. More on that in a second, but I don't have anything else for the outro, so I'm gone. And speaking of our patrons, before we go, I'll give a quick shout out to our patrons like Adam the Heart, Blacklist OG, Call Me Zed, Carlos, Dragon, Flazy Icebird, Jeremy Vasquez, JDV9000, Justice the Fae, Starlight, Legendary Boss Hunter, Liam Kessler, Regent Raptor, Rise of Kenji, Rogue Robin, Sharvor, Sean Pirate, Some Guy Named Bob, and Varian the Crow. Like we do want to support us, consider supporting us on Patreon. Thanks so much, everybody.